Welcome back to another episode of the Innovate on Purpose podcast, hosted by Matt Mueller,
best-selling author of The Mindful Innovator and Rethink Retail's top retail expert.
We help retail leaders find clarity so they can grow their businesses purposefully.
We will uncover mindful tips, innovative solutions, and purposeful leadership advice and strategies that you can apply immediately to your retail innovation. Are you ready to innovate on purpose?
Hey, before we jump into the episode today, I just wanted to say thank you for hitting the play button. You being here fires me up, and I cannot wait to share with you the insights that are going to make a difference in your business. Do me a favor, hit the subscribe button and leave a review so I can reach as many retail leaders as possible. They too need to hear this. Okay, let's do it. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Innovate on Purpose, brought to you by the Mindful Innovator. Today we have a very, very unique topic here, and one that I cannot wait to share with you. We are going to tap into the depths of the universe, into consciousness, and really learn some big lessons about innovation for corporate leaders out there on how do we innovate more purposefully. And we're going to learn those lessons from, well, first off, our amazing guest, medium Brandon Russ, who I had a chance to meet with a couple of years ago in person and go to one of his shows, hear him speak. He is inspirational, amazing the insights that he has. And Brandon is going to tap in today to Nikola Tesla, Thomas Edison, and maybe even Steve Jobs to get some really big lessons on what they have learned on Earth about innovation and what we should be doing to move forward. So Brandon, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Well, I appreciate being on this. And at first, the way that introduction was going, I thought we were going to be on with Neil deGrasse Tyson. I was like, hey, this is going to get good. This is going to be fantastic. Wow, the cosmos, the universe, everything else. Yeah, it's interesting. It's and a lot of people are always, tuning into things like this to be like, let's kind of hear some interesting topics. And that's what grabbed me on this one, because I think it's a rare thing. We have this kind of like historical value that either we pay attention to it or we don't. In Tesla and Edison and, all these innovators that kind of go along with it don't use things like intuition. Well, they do. They didn't really talk about it. They didn't really kind of dive into it. And it's actually part of the decision-making process. And this isn't about whether or not you believe that, a medium connects with the spirit world and delivers messages. I've done over 25,000 readings. It's the only thing I do as a career. So I don't really have to justify it. But what intrigues me, where I really kind of started out and I still do work with, is I'll work with companies to help them with their energy. And that translates into performance models. It translates into satisfaction. It works into, other dynamics. You see somebody like Simon Sinek who really pulls apart, like, but are you happy? And that's like this chase here of innovation, where you had your spearheads of, Tesla, you had your spearheads that, and even Marconi and Darrigan, and, you've got all of these people that were just like, I don't know what this is, but I got to make it. And then that creates an innovation. Well, that's a product, right? Then it became, now we've moved into this kind of intelligence age where it's not necessarily about figuring out the microbe, we're trying to figure out the macro. And we get into this argument about, like, in order to hit the macro, you have to have more players, you have to have more people on board. And that's the part we're really struggling with. We are a social creature, and, personal motivation, the thing about so many early inventors is that it was them and a lackey, at best, but it was them, Not a lot of people, would have known Watson, unless Sherlock Holmes talked about them. So it's the innovation and kind of that human dynamic that comes in, honestly is where we're barreling towards. As an astrologer, I'll say barreling towards the age of Aquarius. And I think that has a lot to do with this as well. But great opener. Way to go. We're doing fantastic.
Well, we nailed
This is a great show already. I don't even know. I mean, we're 3.5 minutes in and we're nowhere near blowing it out to 2.5 hours you told me not to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we could just stop right here. I'll give you this as a highlight reel
There
for
you
you.
go.
That's it.
I
Done.
think it's time for a sponsor, and let's go grab some coffee.
Well, you hit something there too, as far as like, these inventors and innovators, that they got it from somewhere, right? And they always tap into their intuition. I think it was Thomas Edison, where the penny drops,
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah, and it's interesting because you see it perpetuated with anyone. One of my favorite entrepreneurs now is Mark Cuban, because he's really kind of a no nonsense guy, and he, even, and I think we all got a front row seat with him, in Shark Tank. And when I've always been like, okay, so what's my product? What could I go on there with? Like I did the same fantasy every single person that would watch podcasts like this would do. And you're like, okay. And right out of the gate, energetically, Mark Cuban would be a fit for me, because he's somebody that, it's kind of like Henry Ford. When he sat down with two engineers and he said, listen, you're both qualified. You both got the stuff. I just want to get to know you. And he observed. All he did was watch them, because he watched them in process, right? So the process for him was, they both ordered something similar, something steak or whatever. And the first person, took the salt shaker right away, put it right on there as soon as the food got there. And then the other person tasted it first and then salted it to the level that he needed to. And the interview was over. He basically said, by the way, I'm selecting him and whatever. And the person that didn't get the job asked the question. They were like, how did I not get this job? We didn't even talk about like anything about engineering. We didn't talk about anything about process. And he said, I learned everything I needed to know when you salted before you tasted it. And because of that, you actually presented to me what your thought process was. And I think that's where it goes. Thomas Edison was a great process person. He had no problem stealing anything from anyone, right? He didn't care about the creative. I mean, I think Edison gets a lot of credit where, and if there's the knock on the, on the current war, it was that Edison got a lot more credit as an inventor than he should have gotten. That if there's one Tesla thing that people would say, for me as a Tesla supporter and learner, and I've read a half a dozen books, and they all basically say the same thing, but you learn different stuff every time. And basically, Tesla wanted to just invent. Like he was a tortured soul. He was getting downloads. He was getting these things. When you look at his behaviors, Tesla would sleep for 20 minutes every couple of hours. He would not go into long slumbers. He would take a vacation once a year, and he chose to like sleep at very particular times. Well, that allowed him to come out of it. And he's literally saying in that short nap period, I would download and I would wake up and I'd be like, this one's going to be like a pen to paper thing. This one's about radio waves. This one's about electricity. And he was a tortured soul. That's why he invented, right? He didn't give a shit, excuse my French, about whether or not the world was ever going to get disseminated. Thomas Edison comes along and says, my gosh, do you know what a gold mine this is? The problem is, and the only reason why Edison was ever corrupt was what he invested in. He had invested in direct current. It's the only reason why he was a supporter of it. The only reason. He was like, oh my gosh, well, this is the one. This is the grift. This is how we're going to do it. And then Tesla's like, that's dangerous. It's going to hurt everybody. He's like, ooh, get back in your box. And the dynamic with that became ingenuity. So Edison was a business engineer. He was a brilliant business engineer. He was not an inventor. You can say that he invented the light bulb. He didn't. His staff did. And kind of like Steve Jobs. It's like Edison and Steve Jobs may as well have been the same soul, because they used a lot of the same tactics. They couldn't, everything was about business positioning, how it was working. And then ultimately, here's my vision, go do it. I want you to put 10,000 songs in this little box, go. Yeah. And he wasn't an inventor, but he was an enabler for the invention. Edison and Jobs, I think, were that. And I think it's interesting that when you look at innovation and management and that sort of thing, I think it's hysterical how much Elon Musk splits the uprights all the time. Like, I think he's, I think he's one of the most polarizing leaders we've seen in a long time, Edison style. But I think Edison didn't have to deal with public scrutiny. History just told the truth as much as it could.
Yeah.
But
when you think about like the legacy of Edison, it comes down to he invented the light bulb. He did all these amazing things. He's just this amazing innovator, and you don't really see that underbelly as much as you do see, like, I guess with social media being so ever present, Elon,
Yeah.
you see what he's doing every single day. You know what he had for breakfast. Where Thomas Edison, it's just it's I guess it's further down the road, and we didn't have that much access.
And it's interesting. He chose the political realm a lot of the times too. This is another
Mhm.
like one of those fun facts. And again, I grew up in the shadow of Schenectady, where Edison, did his stuff in upstate New York. He was in Jersey. He was in upstate New York. Upstate New York had cheap labor because after they built the Erie Canal, they're like, I got a bunch of laborers up here. You can go do this. And but he had so much clout that when the U.S. Postal Service created the zip codes, he basically was asked, what do you think about this? And he said, yeah, I would like GE to be the zip code 12345. And it became the basis of the entire zip code system. That's how much influence he had.
Mhm.
So it's an interesting thing to see that kind of influence. And I think Elon Musk is trying to do that. But his tactics and techniques, my gosh, I mean, you don't tell people that you're going to do a cost-cutting measure and not understand the risk. He salted a steak before he tasted it with
Yeah.
Twitter. Like, that is his sin. And, you can get into the politics of it and the shades of, what doesn't look good or doesn't feel good. And it's his personal beliefs. And do we want somebody in that much power to have those innovations? But you look at somebody like Bill Gates who rolled up his sleeves. Yeah, I give Bill Gates this credit that he at least rolled up his sleeves. He knows what his products do. He knows how his products. He's not trying to, where Elon Musk is trying to become a social engineer. And I know everybody's kind of groaning going, so is Gates.
Mhm.
But at least there was the glimmer of being kind of the functional practicality that I think technology should bring.
Yeah.
Right. And it's a thing. I mean, think about how impractical our technology is now. It's the purpose of technology is to lower the need to do things, right? And I saw a quote the other day, and I don't think it was a particular like it's not a credit to anyone, but if it is, by all means, let us know in the comments and whatever. But this woman said, I want AI to do my laundry and cut my lawn.
Mhm.
I don't want them to paint and create art for me. And I think that innovation, we can get to a point where we don't have to be innovative anymore. It's like, what's the sense? Like, we're losing our purpose in all of this. Where you
Yeah.
take somebody like Tesla, who is driven by the purpose to just create. I mean, where are we now with that? I don't know. What do you think with that? And by the way, your book really lays out a great idea and a thought process. That's the thing I really like about your book, is that it encourages the space in between. It's like, I don't know where you stand on this, but you got to
Mhm.
address this. And I think that's the kind of leadership that is kind of sorely needed in the tech mart,
Yeah.
in innovation and in leadership. And by the way, leadership comes down to, do people have the tools? It's all the basic stuff that we learn in business school. Do they have the tools? Did you hire correctly? Did you catch them at the right time? Do you encourage environment for growth and advancement and staying? Blah, blah, all of those things. And by the way, after 15 years in human resources, I can tell you that I've never seen a company actually even come close to getting it right. Not one.
Yeah. It's crazy. Yeah, absolutely right. That's why I wrote the book. And thank you for the compliment there too, Brandon. Yeah, it's a framework. It's the
Good
book
book.
is about it being a framework that a company can use to help them navigate change and create innovation, because we are, like, completely overwhelmed, and the world is full of uncertainty today. Right? When you think about AI and it's the things that it's doing for us, I mean, there can be some benefits to it, but
Yeah.
it also does create more stimulus, which creates more confusion. And next thing you know, there's this inertia, that's going on, to where it's like nothing is getting done because we're just, we can't focus on anything. So the framework kind of helps you guide you through that piece of it. And that was kind of the whole concept there.
Yeah. I had a boss once hire me, and he goes, yo, I hired you. I'm like, why? I'm like, I don't know. I'm good looking, blue eyes. You're into it. I don't know. Just kidding. But he was like, I hired you because you have a high figured outable scale to me. And I'm like, oh, tell me about that. And he's like, yeah. He goes, you just figure it out. He goes, you're a smart guy. He's like, I want, in relative terms, if you don't know it, you raise your hand. If you do
Mhm.
know it, you just take care of it. And if it's somewhere in between, you're appropriate with like how you bring people in. Like, you don't waste people's time.
Yeah.
So I'm like, wow, that's a compliment. And then on the other side of it, I said, so why do you think I would leave? And then he goes, well, probably because we won't listen to you. And I said, so what you're saying is that eventually, if you, for the same reasons that you hired me, are the same reasons why I'll leave, because I figured it out. He goes, well played. And I go, it's great. You can hire as many smart people as you need to. But when they come to you and they say this is inherently broken and either it needs to be blown up or completely overhauled, up to and including people's expectations when they're hired. And by the way, this was in a company that was like a GE subsidiary that got sold. And it was investment. That's all it was. And they didn't care if they made money. They didn't care if the workers went on strike. Like, there was no inherent benefit for them to even be in business anymore. I go back to Simon Sinek. He finds those wins very easily. And part of the reason why he does it is because he understands the human need to want to perform, which is what I think every single leader really needs. And I think it's based in intuition. I really do. That's why I talk about it from a spiritual sense. And even if you take out any of the spiritual talk about intuition, it is standard issue in us, whether you call it mother's intuition or gut instinct. If a police officer has a gut instinct, like, a police intuition, or I had a hunch, all of those things are intuitive. Like, it's in the circle of intuition. When a mom has a mother's intuition, is like, I just knew my kid needed this or whatever. All of those things, it's just kind of like how it's used, right? And I had even worked for a police training unit, and I taught intuition, basically, for lack of better terms, intuitive decision making. How to move on a hunch, basically.
Yeah.
And I had to become versed in some of the rules and regulations and whatever. And I'm like, okay, all right. I read it and kind of was like, that's not what we're talking about, but okay. So what you're saying is that every move has paperwork and accountability. Okay, sounds like a police officer. And one of the things I remember, I had an incredible skeptic. I mean, skeptic upon skeptic. He's just like, this is horse hockey. You're a farce. Why are we doing this? I can't believe I'm getting credit for that. Like, this guy just didn't like me. And I'm like, huh. And I said, well, did you ever consider that you don't like me because I'm going to speak the truth, and that I'm not somebody that you can high hand, and I'm not somebody that you can just be an authority figure, because I'm the authority figure. I'm the teacher. You're going to walk in, you're going to sit you're in my world now, buddy. But if I leave here, your first reaction is to figure out where I'm driving to so you can pull me over and harass me. I'm like, that's intuition. And he goes, how is that intuition? And I said, because you have pushed down anything of common sense, because you have placed your ego with intuition, or intuition with ego, rather. He says, I'm not egotistical. I'm very whatever. And I said, you just judged me without knowing me. You just tried the steak without salt. You salted it without testing it, right? Like, so intuition allows you to taste the steak before you salt it. Intuition allows you to give you a compass focus. And by the way, sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. Sometimes you go in the opposite direction, like, I knew it. And then other times you absolutely embrace it and you're like, wow, I nailed it. And I think common people, not just leaders, and by the way, leader isn't title, but if you're in an office and you see the new guy start and they're just bumbling, they're just like, and the side bet is they're going to be out of here in 3 months. You've gotten a gut feeling there. And what you do with that is everything about who you are as a person. If you say, hey, listen, this is money in the bank. Hey guys, I bet you a lunch. This guy's out of here in 3 weeks, 3 months, whatever. Great. Congratulations. Enjoy the salad bar, right? But if you're going to put intuition into action, don't you pull that person aside and say, hey, listen, I know you're struggling. If I can help you in any way, if I can, maybe we should pal around for a day or two. Why don't we grab a coffee? Why don't we whatever? If you actually help the person and then they end up staying there more than the 3 weeks or 3 months, whatever the over under is, are you a failure? Is your intuition incorrect? No, your intuition was spot on. You just chose to take that information and make good on it. And I think that to me is the difference between Tesla and Edison, to be honest with you. Tesla had this undying need to create. He didn't care about whether or not he was going to be right or wrong. In his mind, the only thing that he would be right or wrong about is whether or not he created. Literally, the only stock that he had. Then you have Edison that took full advantage of that. Like, yeah, put your nose back in the book, get back in the room, and whatever. And it was intuitively, in a way, over the years, I always thought it was the battle. And I was always like, I'm pro Tesla, I'm pro Tesla, I'm pro Tesla. Well,
Mhm.
over time, I'm like, Tesla was actually pretty irresponsible to not acknowledge the business consequences.
Yeah.
Like, he was a bit of a noob about it. And as much as Edison was just a leech, man, he was a vampire. We wouldn't have half of the stuff we have
Yeah.
if it wasn't for Edison. So it's like, I have to like the devil here.
So it's the duality of it. You have to like both sides of it. And actually, it kind of reminds me of Disney, right? Where it's like you have Walt Disney, who is the Tesla of the situation, where he has the creative ideas. But he went out of business like 3 times. He needed his brother to help him create the operational structure of Walt Disney World and Land and all of his other companies. So it's just, you need the two.
Right. And I had to, ego's a big thing in business,
Mhm.
right? Like, you want to be able to, I have a friend of mine that saw the CEO or the founder of Uggs, those shoes.
Yep.
And she's like, it was a beautiful day. And, upstate New York, you only get so many of them. And she's like, I think I'm going to go to this, though. I think it'll be beneficial. I'm like, okay, cool. And, I asked her how it went, and she was just beaming. She goes, I'm so glad I went to that, because he didn't just create a brand, he created a culture. And I went, whoa, that's innovation.
Yeah.
That's somebody that can dig in. And I apologize for not knowing his name. He actually he's on the speaker circuit, and he's somebody to be. And then I'm disappointed. I'm like, I should have gone. And it was funny. I kind of got a last minute like invite. She goes, hey, I'm going. We have some free space. And I'm like, of course I have free space. It's 78 degrees, beautiful, sunny in upstate New York. Like, we only get so much time outside.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I think I joked around with her. I go, I wish I had pants. And she's like, didn't need to know that, Brandon. Thanks for. And I'm like, well, I didn't want to go in shorts. I'm like, I was kind of geared to go hang out at a concert. But anyways, so innovation, and I love that you bring up Disney. I think one of the other things, I actually think Walt Disney was a channeler himself, because innovation, I think, when we look at like societal things, I mean, think about just our evolution of a computer, right? Remember when the computer was like this giant thing that took up a room? And you could do computations on it, basically. And then over time, it got smaller, and the capacity and ability got greater, right? That's innovation. That is a classic innovative thing. Well, my hope is that by the time we get to the next generation, the next whatever, that is able to go to somewhere. We bring up AI. AI could be the bastardization of where that technology could lead us astray, or it could be the greatest invention ever made. Disney, that is a clear sign of like tangibly having something and building on it. The innovators, the Teslas, the Disneys, had to come in from somewhere else. I mean, my personal belief, and again, this is where I lose some business people on it, is that, I think Tesla was really downloading off-planet stuff. I think it was being shown things because they found the right person. And when you look at his astrology, he was the right person. He had parent issues. He had the need to be liked, but not social. Like, he was a broken man astrologically, and his astrology shows that. And on the flip side of that, you have somebody like Disney, who basically, the original Epcot, and this is one of those things that has been proven. Like, they're starting to narrow things down. The original concept of Disney Epcot was you had the center city, and that is where the business, the commerce, all of that stuff went. And then you had the next rim, which was where people lived, sky rises, whatever. And then it was all about the tram. It was all about, like, he actually saw the long-term ramifications of vehicles, of gas-powered engines. And then you had the furthest outer rim, and that was where the farming happened and everything else. And you could own a car. There was nothing that didn't fit in America. Like, you could still do whatever. But within the confines of the city, it just made way more sense if you took the tram, because you literally would walk out of your house, get on the tram, and it would drop you off at your office door. You would have to, walk 100 feet either way and get to there. So the design of it was so brilliant. Well, over the course of time with Discovery, it literally looks like Atlantis. The lost city of Atlantis. So you mean to tell me that somebody that's an innovator channels this says, and even when, and I highly recommend, I cannot remember the book, but there is a book specifically about, and I think it's the creation of Epcot or something like the inspiration of Epcot was the book. And it was basically going through the steps and reading and putting in his notes about how he woke up from a dream, about how he had always envisioned this. And these were things he would see glimpses of it when he was a child. And, everything from like the tram to how the glass would be in the building and how people would be dressed and everything else. And he was a futurist about the whole thing, and he was really kind of, parallel to like, Asimov and, another futurist, maybe not Bradbury, but he was always kind of like connected to, kind of futurist writing and that sort of thing. I'm going to tell you, he was back here. Now I'm saying all of this to set this up, this statement. We keep thinking that we build on technology. And the idea of that is that we lose technology every single time we kind of clean the slate, whether it's the Younger Dryas and the flood or whether it's, cataclysmic stuff. They are now finding settlements. All these earthquakes that are happening all over the world are shaking things up and moving them up. And they're now finding technology that would not have existed back when it was. Like they were like, maybe they weren't hunter-gatherers. They found a place that I want to say it's in one of the Baltic countries. I'll just say it that way. And when they started to do carbon dating on it, they found a 3-story building that basically got taken out by like a landslide. And when they started, and they were like, it's perfectly preserved, it must have been muddened and hardened. And, they went through all the science. They're like, okay, on Earth, that would happen. They carbon date part of it. And they realized that the wood was 500,000 years old.
Wow.
Recorded human existence, like when we started going upright and going, me, Tarzan, you, Jane, when we started to do that, is about 300,000 years old. Now we find structures that were multi-level, that were 3 stories that predate even that. I think we're in for a huge reconciliation between what's been buried and new innovations. And I think a lot of the things that were invented over the last 150 years, and it really is a golden age of reinvention. Right?
Yeah.
Whether you look at the Roswell crash and the advancement of self-services since then, and by the way, when the Roswell, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist, I just look at facts and I go, okay, there's something there. When the Roswell crash happened, 3 months later, the Nokia company came into existence. Nokia holds the cell phone patent for the world. And that was developed, it was created, it was built. It was kind of a nod to Japan, like, hey, we're going to be your partners in all of this, post-World War II, all that jazz. And you look at those advancements, you're like, how did we advance that so quickly? Well, then you have computers. How are computers so big and blah, blah, blah? Because they were happening at different paces. And so that then it kind of throws you off just a little bit to be like, boy, look at all this innovation. Well, that innovation was really from the ground up. We had to get struck by lightning. We had to figure it out. We had to go there. And then we had to be the, we got the missing piece of the puzzle. And let's jump here. It's like it's like advancing to go without having to run the rest of the board. So simultaneously, it's like innovation has to be that inspiration from the ground up in the human capacity, as well as that spark from above, whatever that means to you.
Yeah.
And I think to be a good leader, you have to recognize both.
Absolutely. It is the blend of the two. And it's understanding, like, like I was going back to the steak, right? It's like tasting the steak first is kind of like going back before you add in your thoughts, and that's the salt. And it really comes down to finding that spark and evaluating those insights first, and then figuring out where do you need to take it, where do you need to move, and how much salt should you be putting on this steak. So I love that analogy. I'm definitely having steak tonight, no doubt about it.
Well, careful what you do with the salt. And I know you want to keep this tight, but I'll share this one thing, that when I would work with a company, I would come in, and I was always like a change agent. I was a problem solver. They were like, we have this problem. It was usually based in staffing, but I would come in and I would get a big whiteboard, because we live on whiteboards, right? And I would put up 3 columns. I go, what do you want in the 3 columns? And they're like, well, you tell me, you're the consultant. And I said, you mean to tell me you have no vision at all? And I would call out their leadership team like right away. And I go, you mean to tell me you don't even understand what's wrong with you yet? Like, what are your areas of address? Yeah. And then I said, okay, I'll tell you what, I'll do the first line, but you guys are going to do all the rest. I'm not going to help you anymore. I'm just going to start you. And I said, what doesn't work? What does work? What's your wants? What are your dreams?
Mm.
And every single time, invariably, the what doesn't work column would just run for days. Well, this one and blah, blah, blah. And it would even dial down to like personal things. What I was really gauging was the ego of the staff.
Mm-hmm.
If you say, well, we have a system and a process in place, but it's not the best one. Technology has changed. It's 15 years old. We're due for an upgrade. That's on our side for us to tackle that. If I heard that from a leader, I would be like, okay, well, I'm going to be able to do this. And then if they were like, okay, well, what's wrong with the company? And they'll be like, I'll tell you what's wrong. Franken sales is the problem. And you're just like, whoa, like no personal accountability. And I always found that the wants, hey, what's the innovation? What's the part we're missing? Was almost always the workshop, right?
Mm-hmm.
As a consultant, as a, whatever, you're going to walk in and be like, hey, everybody on the mindful, innovator, your money isn't in what's broken. Your money isn't in what works. It's what their capacity of like where their vision is. It's like, aha, that I can work with. And invariably, it would always be the thing where if somebody had the courage to say it, the other people in the room would go one of three ways that they would go. They would go like, my gosh, I had no idea you would even think about this. That's, and they might shame it, but by and large, most of them were like, wow, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Because this is a colleague. They don't want to see them fail unless it's, they're in the position they want or whatever, which is a whole other. And then the second reaction would be, would be the part of like, we have to go back to what's broken.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third way would be like, I think you're imagining a whole new company. Are we capable of doing that? And in the 24 companies that I worked with, I will tell you, half of them had that third lane.
Yeah.
We're imagining a new company here, aren't we? And by the way, of those, the ones that were in that column, all of them are still in existence today.
Mm-hmm.
The ones that didn't, 50-50.
Yeah.
And
It's that reinvention.
it's the John Cotter, theory. If you've never heard or you've never read, our iceberg is melting. I mean, Who Moved My Cheese with Ken Blanchard is a cool thing, and Cotter does a lot of other things. But for me, it's our iceberg is melting because it's about problem solving. It's about the archetypes of every single thing you're going to run into. Everything from Franken accounting, Franken sales, along with the the poobahs and then the middlemen and everything else. And we're our own worst enemy. We are a social creature. We're so worried about fitting in that we don't seek truth. We don't seek truth. And the innovators are always seeking truth, even if they're wrong. They're scientists, right? At the end of the day, we're scientists. We're trying to figure it out. And what do scientists do? They look for validation. Either you prove it or you don't prove it. And then once you do that, then you can move on.
Yeah.
Makes sense,
And
right?
I think it's part of like that intuition, that spark that we talked about is like where it's okay, that's something to investigate. That's something to go and test and learn and see if this is working. Like, I'm wondering, like, so how does in the intuition trainings that you did with the police officers and with other corporations, like, what's like the one thing that our audience can do today to help them find that spark and that intuition? How do they tap into that?
Be still, be quiet. And I think that's an isolate. And it sounds funny to say that, but it's, it's like, oh, this is where all the meditation stuff comes in. And it's like, yeah, it is. I was working with with an owner of a company that he was third generation. And he was so worried about the statistic of the third generation family business. He's like, I'm going to fail. And I said, you have been handed a gift. And by the way, this was a local company. People on the street knew it. It was a good company. And I said, you need to get back into, who you are. One of the challenges that he had, though, was that he kept thinking to himself, what would dad do? What would grandpa do? And when we kind of stilled him, and as a medium, I was like, this is what your grandfather would do. What we started to play as a game was, hey, I want you to sit and think about this, and then I'll give you validation when we talk. He's like, whoa, that would be so important and incredible. Truth be told, I connected with his grandfather, but not on a regular basis. It was just good business most of the time. And when you're able to set aside time for yourself, and again, burnout is a thing, we can get into that. That's a whole other show. But if you take that time every single day, instead of spending all your time on Post-it notes and investigation and everything else, reset your compass every day. And it doesn't take long. 10 minutes, put on a stream music, put on whatever, put on guitar music, put on, I don't care even if it's loud. If you want to hear classic, Skinner and crank it up to 10, do that. Get out of your head in your head at the same time. And if you're able to focus, you will be amazed how much clearer your decision making is, how your relatableness is, and how you decide. Your decisions, you put the weight that you're moving the rudder here for a giant ship. Spend the time to make a good decision.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It makes me think too, of where are people when they have their best ideas? And I don't think I've ever heard anyone say, I was at my desk writing this email and all of a sudden it hit me. I have this amazing idea. Right? You don't hear that too often. You usually hear what? Like, I was in the shower and I had this amazing idea.
I was in the shower. For some reason. And by the way, I think I do all my best work naked. I'm just saying, I don't know. Is HR here? Anyway, yeah, you can be, I'm naked under all my clothes. No, but it's a real thing. And if nothing else, I think what you're really tapping into, if I can pull that back and explain it to HR, I would say you have to figure out what's comfortable for you. And by the way, it does come down to who you're surrounded by. It does come down to, like, if you're a C-level person and you have one of the most important relationships in any business is that number two person to the person in charge. I don't care. I mean, the person in charge is fine, but the person that's next to that person, if they're sitting there going, I've seen some stuff, boy, I can tell you that was what I can tell. I know the truth of what happened. That person is 100% going to sink that ship. You are not only going to get sunk, you are going to deny your trust. So it creates flow. And by the way, it's an energetic thing. It's not because she shared something out of pocket. That's like the loyalty complex and all that other good stuff. Like that's the don't you know who I am crap that so many people in power fall into. That's not the sin. The sin is the broken trust. And I think we don't know how to, as a human, create trust. And, I've been challenged before where I've had people in my camp, and I had a lot of lessons with this because I took a very corporate idea and tried to apply it to spiritual work. I'm like, I'm going to have a shop. I'm going to have products and I'm going to have this, and I'm going to show everybody how good I am at marketing and blah, blah, blah. Well, truth be told is I was just throwing mud at the wall. Whatever stuck. I didn't see things through. They weren't a passion necessarily. Creating a smudge spray was not my passion. So I worked with another person. They got credit for it. Everybody got paid. But I was like, and then I started hawking it. And I'm like, yeah, it's done with this emulsifier and blah, blah, blah. And like I was selling it. I'm like, who cares? If you can ask yourself at the end of a sentence of a statement going, who cares? I kept failing that check. It'd be like, oh, it has these coconut emulsors. Who cares? Oh, well, it's done with lavender. Who cares? And it's not about product placement, but I missed the point of spiritual work for a long time. I mean, I've been in this business for a while, and I made more mistakes than Abe Lincoln. I said that the other day, and I'm going to keep that one. I made more mistakes than Abe. And I started to realize that it really sits in that intuitive realm. It really sits in that part where I say, this is the gig I take. This is the one I let go. Well, this one was going to pay you this much, and this one was going to be this, and you had to travel. Okay. A few of the greatest decisions I made was about travel, and and my gut intuition was like, I got to go to Florida. There's some people I've got to meet. It's where you and I met.
Thanks for coming.
And it's, it's like, oh, I'm not in a hurry to get back. I mean, we're good. We can do this. But it's, but it's valuable. I did a whole tour down there. I got connected with a good promotion company, and I got, connected with some really good people in the process. And then I'm like, okay, I'm going to come back and do my work. And they're like, you don't want to keep going on tour down here? And I'm like, no, I'm good. I'll be back.
Yeah, go what you need for now, and your intuition will tell you when to come again.
Yeah, because intuitively, I've since gone to places like Memphis and Texas. And by the way, I didn't realize it at first, But all of those places needed my energy because it aligned with things such as politics, such as my politics, where it wasn't, when I found out that my book was on a ban list, I started, I go, are you kidding me? It's just
That's
me
pretty nuts.
telling a story, a series of stories about connections that I've had, but since it deals with, the actual mediumship, and there's stories in there.
Amazing.
Oh, there you go. Thanks.
Amazing book.
I don't have a copy of it right here. I'm the Ward's promotional person as well. I mean, that right there literally proves that I'm 100% in the Tesla lane. Like I know the concepts, I just don't apply them. I'm such
Put a lot
a
of shit out there, but where it goes, who knows?
I'm a Pisces and a Leo rising. So I want to create. And by the way, that's another thing. If you want to have another takeaway on that, figure out how you work. I'll actually do the astrological work on a company and figure out who's a fit and who isn't, and who works well with others and not. Because in your astrology, and by the way, if you don't want to believe in it, all right, I'm not here to convince you. I will tell you the people that do follow it run like a top, because they figure out how to communicate with one another. They figure out how to have passions. If your culture is a work hard, play hard culture, astrologically, it is a very specific combination. And then you're like, how do I ask that? The trouble is legally, I can't say, I kind of need your birth time. Forget about your birthday.
Yeah.
I can't ask any of that stuff. So I can only kind of do post analysis. But I will tell you, if we could get that right, we would recognize that, compatibility really works. Instead, we have, disc training. And I was certified in all that stuff, right? And the thing that I kept finding was, it'd be like, if you had an office of like all high Ds, like just wait for the Lord of the Flies moment. Just wait for it, because management's going to die a cruel, horrible death in that moment, because they're all alphas. You got to have mixes, man. Anyways, we're getting on another topic.
All right, Brandon. I'm going to bring us back in now. I want to bring our panelists in a little bit here. So we have Thomas Edison and Tesla waiting here in the green room. If we could channel them right now.
Okay.
So like, what was Nikola Tesla's like biggest learning here on Earth?
No. I'm going to go here with those. I think he, like I said, he was a tortured soul. And I think he realized how unappreciated he was, but that's not what made him tick. His biggest flaw was because he lacks so much social awareness and recognition and interaction. I think his regret was what's on the cutting room floor. It's the things we don't have in his existence, and I can't believe we haven't brought up Einstein, but I'll tell you, there's a lot of Einstein stuff right here. And it's almost about him. Einstein's your figure it outable guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what Tesla's showing me is I was figuring it out. Give me a problem, let me solve it. His problem-solving capabilities were beyond. It's not recognition, it's application. Did you know that he had an invention that if you sat on it for 37 seconds, it just gently vibrated? You're like, that sounds kind of weird. He figured out the rate of peristalsis. So if you were constipated and you sat on that for 37 seconds, you would have to run to the restroom. That doesn't exist. That machine, that product doesn't exist because all of the other stomach medications do. That, I think, is his greatest regret.
Wow.
That he couldn't monetize it. Makes sense?
How does he feel about Edison and the way that he took his ideas and didn't get credit for it? I mean, I know he said he's all about the ideas, but is there any type of
he was in service. You want to see somebody be in service, it's somebody that he cared about the science. Like, the way to disrespect Tesla was to say, I don't believe you. Or to say, who cares? Right? Who cares? Think about the possibilities with this. Think about whatever. For him, and by the way, English was a second language to him until he started dreaming in English. Part of the reason why he came to the United States was because they were showing it to him in English.
Wow.
Yeah, that was a thing for him. And I think, again, his greatest regret, he doesn't care about fame. He does not care about fame, but there's a reason why he became post-famous. Because it's the only way to rack that. Wow. What's the spring? Did you actually try and put together a clock?
Clock?
Yeah.
I did when I was in high school.
And they're showing me the spring. Like literally you had a problem with the spring.
That's my grandfather's watch. I inherited his watch when he passed away last year, and I sent it over to get repaired. The spring was broken.
He's saying I could have fixed it for you.
No,
And did you try and fix it yourself?
I was thinking about it, but it's a Rolex, and I didn't want to mess with it.
Oh, so it had value.
Yeah,
What value does it have to you?
it's everything. I take it on every stage with me when I speak because it's my grandfather's.
And he's talking about the spring being. Your grandfather was an innovator too. Well, what was the chocolate?
He was, yeah.
Was
What's
he?
that?
Was he a teacher? I don't get what this is.
No, he worked in the banking industry, but I mean he came over as an immigrant from Austria around World War II time.
Edelweiss.
Yeah, that's his town. So Sound of Music. That was his town in Austria when he was growing up.
So now I'm going to tell you the rest of the story. My grandmother became really good friends with the Von Trapps when they moved to the United States.
Really?
And we owned a jewelry store for a century. She got in good with them. Like she just would go to the resort and they clicked and they hit it off. And my grandmother would supply like Christmas presents for their, like the corporate gift, for lack of better terms.
Mm-hmm.
And they became really good friends. And I have a couple of pictures of my grandmother and my mom, actually, who was 6-7 years old, like hanging out with the Von Trapp kids, who were older then. I mean, they were definitely older at that point.
Not 16 going on 17.
Well played, Matthew. Well played. But no, it's a dynamic. It's just funny because that symbolism is in my dictionary. Like, so it was really easy for me to, connect with that. And I'll tell you, I wouldn't be surprised if your grandfather knew them, and then therefore that's the connection between you and I. Isn't that crazy?
That is pretty crazy.
Having a jewelry store, the watch means everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow.
That's crazy.
Man, I wish I would have known he could have fixed it for me.
No. As in, I think he would have showed you how to do it. I mean, that's one of those things.
Yeah.
Have you ever tackled something where you're like, I've never done this before, but I'm going to go do it?
Oh yeah,
like,
all the time.
I will tell you, like home improvement stuff, I fail miserably at. And by and large, I'm going to be like, if it's plumbing or electrical, I absolutely outsource that because you don't want to learn those lessons, right? But if it's like, hey, this banister is a little off, it's like, it's a couple of pieces of wood. Brandon, come on, let's do it. In those moments, what I should do is really sit and think about it. Like, and I know it sounds like slapping two pieces of wood together, but to look at the problem and kind of be like, this is the way I want it to be. If I pay attention to my intuition, it will tell me exactly how to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
It really will. And whether I'm channeling Tesla or a carpenter or whatever, my higher self knows. So even as a leader, your higher self always knows. It's your gut feeling, it's your whatever. And I think that the biggest sin in business is to quell capacity, whether it be for success or the human potential, because you want to manipulate it for your own good. That's the sin of Edison. He was trying to manipulate because he had an investment over here, so he didn't want the advancement over here.
Yeah.
And that's, even in this, it's like you had an opportunity to fix your watch. You chose to outsource it. Are you treating it with care, or did you miss an opportunity? And by the way, if you had tried to fix it and you really screwed it up, wouldn't you have just taken it to the watchmaker anyways?
This is true. Yeah.
I'm just giving you perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And is he the R? Who's the R? Who's the grandfather? What was the town? It's more of the town.
Oh my. Well, he's Gacher. The town was Gacher.
Gacher.
Yeah, his name was Oscar.
Love that.
Mm-hmm.
Oscar Mueller.
His last name's Epic.
That's awesome. Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
All right.
So thinking about now Edison and his approach to it, does he have any regrets? And what kind of advice would he give today's innovators?
He did everything he was supposed to do. Like and I'm going to pull out one political thing. It doesn't matter. Politicians, you could be the most angry person in the world at a particular person. Politicians are easy to be angry with. They're fulfilling a purpose. Mm-hmm. Thomas Edison fulfilled a purpose in such a way. And by the way, you might not understand the purpose for 10, 20, 100 years, but the purpose was there. Why did, Why did Paul Revere do his ride? Which, by the way, was much shorter and much less dramatic than what the tall tale was. But it became a tall tale because it was so darn important, right? We have the capacity, and I think Thomas Edison became the tall tale. Thomas Edison became the thing where, and he kind of fed into this kind of human. Again, we're a social creature. To ostracize somebody for poor behavior, the cancel culture is part of that. The Me Too movement was part of it. And I'm not saying it wasn't rooted in ideas of being able to say, like, that's not cool, right? I'm not justifying it ethically or morally. I'm looking at it as a social construct that it is. Thomas Edison would have been canceled 6 ways to Sunday when he electrocuted an elephant in a square, saying, "You see how alternating current, kills people? Well, anybody that you put 10,000 watts through is going to eat it, right? Like, it's just, don't be an idiot. Don't be cruel." He would go to means that would be extreme because of what he was trying to protect. And that is a truism. If you can learn something as a leader about Edison, people that work with extremes are trying to keep you off what the problem is or what the real source is or what the whatever is. And that's, to me, as somebody that would be a social commentator, I look at the extremism of what we're dealing with in Washington and the extremism in technology. AI is going to ruin us and blah, blah, blah. What are you hiding? I think I wouldn't categorize Edison as an innovator. I would categorize him as an illusionist.
That's
And
very
that's not to say
interesting.
he didn't do good things, because that was part of the equation. He had to do things. He had to bring light bulbs. He had to make GE. He had to manipulate Westinghouse. And the only reason why GE and Westinghouse ever got together is because GE got the upper hand and Westinghouse was done. He was just like, I can't do this anymore, right? He was already Westinghouse is already making deals with the Rothschilds, and he was worried about the railroads. He was with the Carnegies. He and the DuPonts, like, he was wheeling and dealing with everybody. Westinghouse used Edison. Like, he was one of the few people in culture that actually got over on him. And I think Edison realizes, and again, energetically, he can't go back and change it. He played his role. But I think anybody, including him, that has a higher self-intelligence would be like, I didn't have to do it that way. It could have been a little more planning. I could have said, hey, and by the way, some of that, speaking of which, I was talking about, recruiting people that were working in polymers and plastics and rubber and whatever. It's part of the reason why companies will give patent rights to their employees instead of just take it. And they're called the Edison clauses.
So on Edison, though, so now you're saying that he played the role that he had to play. But we're also telling, like, leaders today to remove the ego, and do good, right? And to innovate for the benefit of human beings. So what if they just are playing the role they need to play and they have to be assholes? Or or get over.
There's part of that. I think the ego and innovation kind of go hand in hand sometimes, right? Because you want me on that wall, you need me on that wall. You need somebody that is built that way. I've been in a lot of bands, and every band needed one person that was just like, man, we're gonna get the gigs, man, we gotta practice, man, we gotta whatever. And they would kind of be the punchline of a few of the things, like, I don't know, let's 9-figure Tony wants. That was a Tony Iommi joke, everybody, you're welcome. He was missing the same figure Tony Iommi was missing. But in those bands, you criticize the guy and he was the jerk. But on the flip side of that, you were like, thank God he got us this gig, man. Thank you. Like, you would always in kind it. And you would be like, man, I know I haven't said this to you lately, but can thank you, man. Thank God you got us in this. I'll never forget. I was in this festival. It was a county fair. And at first you're like, county fair, it's like in upstate New York, it's kind of a thing. And, it's one of those things, like, during fair season, it starts like late July, it goes to the, end of September. And if you could get one of those gigs, it was a good time, because you knew you were going to play in front of 1,000 people, right? And I'll never forget it. We're playing, and I'm looking around, and the band had kind of said, we're going to do one more gig. Everybody's got too much going on. Cody got married, but you know the lines. And sure enough, we're at the gig, and just in the middle of it, we like started missing each other. And that's when we realized, like, prick Tony got us all these awesome gigs. And now we don't have Tony anymore because Tony is like, I'm done. I got to go do something else. And in the middle of it, I'm like, there was a song that we always started out with because we just came out ripping. And at the end, we're all looking at each other like one more time, and we started like we ended. And we played the song twice, which is bad form, but we did it anyways because we knew it was the last time we were going to play.
Yeah.
And we had such a great time playing it, like such an awesome time playing it. How the hell did it get here? But it's about that one personality in it, where in that moment he wasn't the jerk, and the bass player who was always the steady Eddie wasn't getting extra credit anymore. He was just the guy that showed. The lead singer that forgot we had practice for 2 months, and then the one guy that just wanted to hang out with us and would carry our stuff for us. So it's like personality traits always kind of render eventually where somebody's going to go and who they are.
Yeah.
If you can find the right combination, you can catch magic in a bottle.
Mm.
That's the ultimate.
I think I could add to that too, where it's like, so you're gonna be able to help an innovation by taking control and sometimes being that jerk and get you that gig, and that's needed, for innovation. But I guess maybe the one thing I would challenge folks here is to think about the intention of why you're doing it, and if it is to advance it forward, if it's to help the team, the company, whatever it is, at least you've put that lens on it, that intention on it, and say, okay, I'm doing this for this reason, and it's not because I'm an egomaniac or I want to prove to Susie that I'm right or whatever it is. Just make sure you have the right intention.
Yeah, are we gonna practice all day, or are we gonna actually play out? Because and it's all about the motivation. In a business, it's about your bottom line. In a band, it's about the girls. So just being honest. I mean, there's only so many women in your mom's basement, Tony. Like, we got to play out. I'm having a great time over here. I'm also contesting things. But no, and then over time, like as you evolve, your priorities change. Just like when you first start doing business, your goal is to make money. When you start playing in a band, it's about, I want to emulate the rock star and the girls or whatever your personal motivation is. Over time, as a business, it goes deeper than that because you become the person's home. You become the person's whatever. In that band, that transformation that I talked about with that band, we were family. We ignored the fact that we had become close friends. We ignored the fact that whatever. Tony was our punchline. We were like, yeah, this is getting tough. Let's just call it quits. We got other things to do. I was getting calls. I was no longer, like, I was one of those guys that just, everybody kind of knew me, and I was a really good backup. It was really good. And I wasn't offended by it. That was my role. And if that's what got me gigs and got me an extra $80 every couple of weeks, whatever. But on the other side of that, businesses become, you spend a third of your life, you're spending 8 hours a day in a place, and you're relying on their personality, their system function, their purpose. And that's why you see a lot of companies with this trend about, being a conscious company. Well, what the frick does that mean? Well, we're environmental. Okay. Plant a tree. They do the bare minimum so that they can get a title. But companies that truly embrace that stuff create a culture that people will stay for the culture. And, I don't see many companies that really knock that out of the park. But I don't think that's the reason. I don't gauge that as a failure or a success. I think that sometimes there is the perfect person. You look at the Yankees from 96 to 2004 under Joe Torre. He was the perfect manager to manage. And again, you can be critical that they went out and they bought contracts and A-Rods and, and whatever. But that 98 lineup that just mowed through everybody. I mean, you couldn't, whatever. Joe Torre was smart enough to go, he didn't say a thing. His concern was whether Zimmer was gonna like eat chili and like fart in the dugout. Like, that was his biggest thing, right? He was like, I don't know how Zim's gonna be. And Stoudemire was at the top of his game because he knew what to say to pitchers. He took Mike Messina from a third, fourth slot guy on the Orioles and brought it. And I know he was the ace, but compared to other people, he ends up being a number 2. But he was such a good number 2. If they were, and they never lost more than 3 games in a row that year. But every single time they were at 3 games, they went on a 3-game skid twice. Messina was the next pitcher, and they knew it was going to be a win. They knew they were only going to give up maybe 2 runs, maybe, and that's if they got in the bullpen. That's where you really know the personality of your organization. That's where you really know that, and then you become legacy stuff. Now you still see people be like, the Yankees are number 1. No, they're not. They have 1.5 good players, and they've got 3 really good personalities. They are not a great team by any stretch of the imagination. They find lightning in a bottle with 1 or 2 pitchers. They ride that out, but they are no longer on plan. They're on luck.
Yeah.
In 98,
your company changes by the people that are inside of them.
100%. But I'll tell you that you walk into Yankee Stadium and the ego's still there. Don't you know who we are? Don't you know we swept the Mets in 98? Don't you know number of rings?
How many this year? It's always about now, right? So it's just that's a great point. Like on the companies that do fail, right? The ones that do eventually, the giants that crash. Kodak, like, is number 1, right? It's like Blockbuster.
Failure to innovate.
Yeah, they failed it.
Well, those are 2 very. You're talking about like innovators, where Kodak really had a chance. I mean, Kodak presented it, but true to form, they went down the Edison route, and they're like, that would kill our business. He didn't look at it as innovating business, so it was all about mindset. And then you had somebody like Blockbuster who got replaced by technology, and Blockbuster did its job. I mean, how many people had Blockbuster as one of their first jobs?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, people are like, oh yeah, or how many people at least, and this is in the tens of thousands of people that remember, oh my God, I remember going into Blockbuster. Well, I knew somebody, so I was able to make sure I got all the hot releases, or whatever. I remember going in there. I mean, this is when I worked. I started working when I was 13. Like, I was 13 years old. I was working 40 hours a week illegally, by the way. Thank you very much. And by the way,
I'll edit it out.
Yeah, that's fine. And I'm not going to, and I'll make it easier for you. I won't mention any names, but it rhymes with Burgers Bagels. Anyway, so see what I did there? By the way, Burgers is no longer in existence, so we can statute of limitations has waned off in the 37 years, 35 years that I would have. Anyways, we're all.
I thought it was a 50 year now. Okay.
No. Well, then they're screwed. Boy, do I have stories about that stockroom. I told you I was in a band for a reason. Spirit's trying to slow me down. I'm not going there. What the hell were we talking about? So working from a young age. I remember getting a paycheck and being like, and talking to my, friends, and they would be like, oh, this release is coming out on video games, and we were playing Super NES. I mean, I'm old school. And, I remember getting a couple of video games and then just, sitting around and playing video games, and it drove me crazy. It drove me crazy to think about just sitting around and doing that. But I'm like, I want to fit in with these guys. These are my friends. That was one of my earliest, things to whatever. But the innovation, it's not Blockbuster's fault, but it is Kodak's fault. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Well, with Blockbuster, they could have recognized the moment of we need to change our model, right? It's like that conversation you had like with your corporate clients, and what are we going to do? Are we going to change something here? What do we not like what's going on? And I see a new business here, and Blockbuster recognized that there was a new business there too late. Once Netflix was knocking on their door,
our iceberg is melting. That's why I go back to that. To that John Cotter, take on it. Your ability to realize that it doesn't work is a thing, and you need to address your ego. You need to address the idea that your dreams are now no longer you have to go through a couple of ego deaths. You also have to bereave it. You have to be like, okay, that didn't work. I'm going to take this weekend off. I'm going to think about it. Some people can bounce back, and some people live in it. I will tell you personally, I mean, like, when I went through this, I had I had 2,500 square feet. I had multiple spaces for practitioners. And when the pandemic hit, that was a serious, I'm like, none of this works. My entire model was based on people coming in, my entire model. And I personally had started to switch because I had what my career was, and then I had what the shop's career was. And my personal career was changing. I was actually doing things online. I was beginning to travel. I was beginning to do those things and externalize it because I'm like, this isn't going to work long term. I had at least realized that change was coming. But when the pandemic hit and I couldn't, even when you saw people, you were like, I got to be over here. I can't, like, all of the energetic values were gone, and it crushed the business, which, by the way, I think was part of the intention. But again, that's another story.
Yeah.
Going through that, though, made me better at who I am because I had to let it go. There were some things that were intrinsically not working. Just because I had it doesn't mean it was successful. My vacancy rate, I remember I was looking at the vacancy rate and I decided to take myself out of the numbers. My vacancy rate was something like 92%. And at 92%, I'm like, how is this open? And then I'm like, okay, if I was going to advise me, what would I do? And it was so painfully obvious. And then all of a sudden they were talking about, this possible pandemic and this possible thing and the possible da 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 da. And I went, okay, universe, is this what you're showing me? Let's do it. What it was really telling me personally, and again, I'm following my own intuition, is it's going to look different. You need to do this differently. I started a YouTube channel. I started talking on it. I just let my personality out. I started to be topical. I made a video about the astrology of Ukraine, the Ukraine war, the pros and cons of what Russia was doing, the pros and cons of the Ukrainian people. And I had 1.5 million views. Like, it was insane, like overnight. And I didn't even know what I was watching, to be honest with you. I didn't even realize my numbers were that high.
Wow.
And about a week later, I looked at it and I'm like, oh my God, I'm a thing. You got to make more videos. You got to do more stuff like this. And then I started to do it, and I slowly, and I realized that I wasn't going to be a YouTube darling. To do that, you got to pump out so many videos. And of course, that's where I struggled with, I want to have it cut edited, and I want this graphic, and my picture in my head, I think about it, how George Lucas thought about the initial Star Wars. He's like, oh my gosh, the cantina scene was 1/10 of what he thought it was. Right. But he still had to run with it. And that's part of innovation too. What don't you have? That I kept thinking about those things where I'm like, okay, I don't have the time or the skill or the ability or the money to pay for like professional cut editing and blending and whatever. It's like, I'm really going to need to figure this out of myself. And then I got caught in the human mental trap of, I look like everybody else. I'm doing the same thing.
Yeah.
And then at some point you have to say to yourself, like, well, there's nobody like me. The one thing that I always thought about that in competition when, by the way, after being 15 years in corporate recruiting is very cutthroat. It doesn't hold a candle to the spiritual world, to the spiritual business. It is so ridiculously cutthroat, and it's people thinking they know and, bastardizing their own intuition and being like, Spirit told me this and you're a fool. And it's just nonsense. It's not, that's the part that gives us a horrible reputation. And it's not based in reality. But I realized that no matter what would happen, no matter what failures I had, no matter what challenges I might have been faced with, no matter how many books I sold, there was nobody that could do what I do. And that's not an ego thing. It's a recognition of self-quality.
Yeah.
And I think that's a high leadership trait, to be like, well, good luck being me. I had somebody that studied under me and they were a good medium. And she was actually one of the rudest students I'd ever had. Like, she had no problem texting during class and, answering phone calls in the middle of a meditation. Like, she was just a jerk.
Oh.
She was like, she was on planet her. And when I began to struggle, are we good?
Yep.
When I began to struggle, she struck out. She recruited the person that I had in my shop. She decided to do this. I mean, it was just cutthroat stuff. And by the way, she was in the used car industry before then. So personalities will resonate. And sure enough, and meanwhile, I'm in recruiting. I'm like, okay, I'll find more people. I'll do that. I don't care, whatever. I'll miss the people and I'll always know them, but all the same. She literally took 90% of my model and just basically said, I can do this better than Brandon. And I'm like, okay. And then in this world, in this mediumship world, people will get readings from different people over time. And I virtually would hear the same negative comments every time. And what my challenge was not to pile on. I'm like, ooh, yeah, she's this, she's that, she's whatever.
Yeah.
What I found myself saying is, boy, she's a really good medium. I'm sorry you didn't find what you were looking for. Let's make this a different experience. And true to form, at the end of every, whatever my positive percentage rate is, would say, not only was that different, she goes, it's not, people would comment, it's not even the same thing. Like, you were such a different breed. You were such a different person. And I'm like, good. Don't ever put me in that pool again.
Yeah.
And that's true differentiation. And I'm just simply owning what my skills and talents are.
Yeah.
And I think that's lost on leadership sometimes too. What are they doing? Let's do that. There's a
Yeah.
difference between awareness and copycat stuff. I've been copied so many times I can't count.
Yeah.
But they tend to fail because they miss the one ingredient, and that's me. So you have to remember that thing that you are, the reason why you got hired, the thing that makes you unique, your motivators, everything else. And motivators aren't always money. It's not always fame. It's not always success. Sometimes it's actually doing a good job. That will churn over time, and you'll get to the bottom of what you really value. And that's the human experience to me.
Yeah, so it's just coming out and being authentically you, because no one else can be that.
Come on, did you just drop authenticity?
That's it, man.
Yeah, I'm so proud. I'm so proud of that. But that really, I mean, think about that. When you meet, again, I go back to Simon Sinek. He talks about being a truth broker, an honest broker, he calls him. And he tells a story about this woman, and it's like, I'm very curious about why we deceive people, because when I connect with your loved ones, like, they're not going to BS me. Like, I'm getting the full scale. But why would you need that? Well, I'm protecting the ego. I'm protecting the hurt. I'm protecting the pain. I don't want to do that work yet. Okay, fine. But then you have, kind of the honest broker. And he tells a story about this friend of his that's in this play. And she landed the lead, and she landed, she's singing and she's acting and, all of these things. And Simon's just like, it was the worst thing I'd ever seen. It was honestly the most garbage-filled play I'd ever seen. There was no redeemable value except to watch my friend live her dream. So afterwards, they're all buzzing. She's still in costume and makeup. She comes out. And if anybody finds this clip, it's so worth watching. Like, there's an extended clip to it. And he's describing it. He's describing how she's coming off, and she's patting herself down, and she's receiving the flowers, and she is the queen in that moment. And he's just like, this isn't the time. I'm an honest broker, but I have to figure out what I need to be honest about. And he says to her, I loved watching you live your dream. I loved it. I enjoyed you getting the spotlight. And in the moment, it was the most appropriate thing he could have said, because he doesn't want to be a buzzkill. He doesn't want to be whatever. But a short time later, he calls her up and says, so do you want to hear what I think about the play?
Yeah.
And notice how he was like, category 1 is where I'm going to reveal, and then category 2. And I think it's a really important thing in any personal relationship to allow that person to tell their story. And then he said, he's like, listen, it's garbage. It was garbage. It was terrible. It was the worst thing I'd ever seen. I'm going to encourage you as a friend, though, because I saw that spark. I saw your influence. You have to be a little more discerning about what kind of projects you take, because I can't sit through another one of those, and I want to share in the joy of you doing this. It was one of the kindest, what the hell were you thinking conversations I've ever heard of. And he's basically saying, I want to love what you do, but be more selective, because I think that's your next step. He even said, he's like, she took it because it was the only thing offered. Okay. So it's about a growth. It was an opportunity to grow.
Yeah.
And he knew her potential, and he wasn't trying to protect his time from seeing crappy plays. He was trying to protect her effort into something good, because he knew her potential. Bam! Surround yourself with people like that. Surround yourself with people that will rip the Band-Aid off and be authentic, and not allow it to be I don't always know where they're coming from. I don't even know what I'm going to expect from them. I don't, whatever. And we've surrounded ourselves with too many people like that. And I know I did. Back in the day, I just wanted to be liked. I had a ship to run. I had a shop to run. I needed to sell so many things. And if I had to bend over backwards and grab my ankles, I would do that, because I would still, quote unquote, live a dream. And then when I started to realize it wasn't even a dream, it was just a business expediency to have a shop and to be a medium. They were all I was drawing people in. I would do message circles, a couple of times a month, and I would get 30 people in there. Well, guess what? They would buy $100 worth of stuff. and then I could justify hiring somebody. Like it was that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Where it wasn't, do I really love the crystals? I enjoy them. I work with them. I have a Super 7 right here on my desk if anybody's an aficionado. But it's when everything fell apart, it gave me the opportunity to say, what do I need? And it's like I had nothing left to lose but to be that authentic person. There it is.
Amen. So actually talking about authenticity, I want to talk about Steve Jobs a little. So he seemed to have lived his authentic life. No matter
You're a
what it
fan.
cost.
You're a fan.
What's that?
You're a fan.
Well, Steve, I love his innovation. I love the way that he presented Apple, and it's very interesting to see the way that he ran a company, which was product first. So thinking about Steve Jobs and his approach to innovation and business, what are your thoughts on him living his authentic life and just bringing a lot of challenge for his employees?
Talk about a tortured soul. Steve Jobs hid in the closet for most of his life. And it wasn't until he got sick that he came out. And even then he was vague about it. I think that because, and again, parlance of our times, in the 80s, into the 90s, I get it. I understand it. We weren't necessarily socially accepting. And I think he missed one of the greatest opportunities that the human culture needed at the time. Had he come out and been an innovator around that, I think he was very shy about it because I know, Matt, I give you full credit. I know you want me to go down this path about, sometimes you have to be the jerk. He was the Tony in the band scenario where it's like, listen, I'm getting sales. I'm going to do this. And he set it up as a corporation where he didn't share, he didn't whatever, he just gave expectations. But, mistakes were made because of that, and resentment was built and all that other stuff. None of that is good energy. And I think it actually resides in the fact that he wasn't honest with himself. He wasn't honest with the people around him. And for him to have come out, certainly now in 2024, to have a CEO that is gay becomes a conversation that's not a conversation starter anymore. And that's progress. And that's part of the reason why there's so much turmoil, because it's not a problem, right? But he lost one of his opportunities to be an innovator socially by putting himself in that principled effect of saying, I love this man over here. And I'm not critical of him for that, because again, I get the time of it. But I think he missed that part of it. Now, that being said, he was a geek trying to run a business. I'd say the same thing about, Bill Gates. It's and I think Zuckerberg's going through this too. They're not socially adapted to be leaders. They're innovators. So they need to kind of turn it over to other people. And I think the best leaders surround themselves with smart people. I think innovators allow themselves to say, this is a lexicon that we want. We want creativity. Steve Jobs set a lot of goals that were insane. Think about it. That he was a visionary. I think his innovation took a hit because he cared more about the vision than the person. Had he been a little more humanistic and said, I love this man, then he might have been a little more like, the inspiration would have come if it was meant to come. It's all about how you do it. And he was kind of like, hey, we're going to create a culture where this is all we work on. Hey, we're going to create a culture where it's either success or failure. There's no third direction. Progress is progress. And I've got this, you guys can't get this iPod down. Wait till I hit you with the iPhone. Wait till I hit you with this. And to his credit, though, he stayed true to a vision. Had he done that, I think he would have, or had he just owned that part of it and not worried about the success and the payment. Have you ever seen a company be successful born out of revenge?
No.
So why do we praise Apple?
Mm-hmm.
And again, I have an iPhone. I'm an i guy. I'm a Mac guy. It wasn't until all of the compatibilities went sideways and then, Apple started to say things like, you won't be able to upgrade anymore, and you'll eventually have a lifespan of about 7 or 8 years. But that's the speed of technology, so you have no problem ruining it. It's like, it's like the car dealers that say you've got 8 years in this car. If you make it to 10, consider it a bonus.
Mhm.
And that's a manipulation to me. And my criticism of Apple in their leadership now, because I'm trying to remember the guy who's running it now, because they're on their
Cook.
third CEO since he passed, right?
Is it Cook now?
Yeah, thank you.
Hmm.
It's almost like now they're kind of answering that stock price became the end all, the be all. And again, I don't mean to hark back to this, but he has a daughter he doesn't acknowledge. You can't be an innovator and be an asshole, to me. If you think that you can be focused, you can make mistakes. You can say, I completely forgot it was her birthday. But to say, oh, yeah, no, you're going to need to put me through a paternity test, even though I know full well that's my daughter. Those character flaws point out the innovation, what the motivation of innovation is. If it is pure capitalization, it's a problem. If it is, Tesla, his head was so in the clouds, he never, he talked about going on one date with a cousin, parlance of the times. And he said, I didn't know what to do with her, and I knew it would take too long to figure her out. Talk about being a metaphor for all women. So sorry.
Yeah.
But he basically was like, as a machine, I can't figure her out, so I'm not going to. He figured out what was the spend of his time, right? Which is why he died alone, and all of the legends are there. Steve Jobs, I think, had at least enough social acumen to say, I can make mistakes. His ego really drove him. And even it was stomach or pancreatic cancer. I can't remember which one. It was stomach, right?
I think it's pancreatic.
Pancreatic. I mean, it's like, that is a rough, and again, I don't wish ill will on him, but that's an energetic value to me with how he went. And insulin is a balancer in the system. Pancreas helps you stay balanced and with your sugars and your insulin and everything else. He was not in balance. So as much as he was an innovator, he wasn't balanced. And you see that with Tesla, you see it with Edison, you see it with Elon Musk, you see it with these people where if you want to see an advancement, and by the way, they're playing their role. Right now, you're seeing people play their role because that's the elevation. The thing that that will actually advance it is when we start to see people be balanced. And that's been my quest. Like, my personal quest has been like, how do I balance? That's why I'm like, I woke up one day and I'm like, I haven't played drums in 2.5 years. Like, what? I used to play every day for hours. My neighbors love me, by the way. And then one day to just hang it up because I was under the fallacy of I need to be the best medium ever. And the only way
laser focused on that one task, that one thing, and you lose your balance.
And I started having feet issues. I started having all sorts of things. And it was because I was denying things and I would have outlets. I mean, writing books and, doing speaking and that sort of thing. I mean, doing everything's got a comedy twist to it. So I'd always stay in the, I call it a stream of consciousness, very similar to Robin Williams. It's funny, with all of the great mediums that were out there, the person that influenced me the most was Robin Williams. How he worked was closer to how I worked, which is I would get into the zone and I would, whoop, okay, all right, here you go. And then I would just be like, oh yeah, well, if I meant that, then I'll say this is funny and I'll do this thing. And I liked a little weird. And it'd be like, was I inappropriate? No, but wasn't inappropriate. Is HR here? My eyes are up here. I would joke around, on a continuous basis, because I also learned that the right creativity and the right creative energy had humor to it. If I was able to make a crowd laugh, the elevation of the energy went from here to here. As an innovator in this work, and I consider myself with that, and the failures included, is that when I'm able to raise the energy, like if I'll never forget this. I had a show. I was at an American Legion. I was doing a fundraiser, and I came out, and there were like 70 people there. And if you've ever been to an American Legion in upstate New York, they tend to be a little drab. Their lighting's a little off. Everything's a little. There's just a thin color of yellow rust everywhere, right?
Yes.
And so, cue the music. I come out, and about 6 readings in, I was bombing. the energy was awful. And I said, everybody stop. We're going to refocus the energy here. And there was somebody there that had been drinking, and I know the reason why. Everybody was taking full part of the dollar drafts, and which I've always said, if you've had too much spirit's not coming to you. And I reset everybody. I said, let's all take a minute and just relax for a second. I want everybody to bring in their loved one. I had to get them into the mindset. I had to do something that was not of the norm, because what I was doing as the norm wasn't working. In-game audibles, I think, are another high emotional IQ, as well as being able to kind of like bring people to their potential. The rest of the show was amazing. Flat out amazing. And what I learned in that moment was, this is still human interaction. We're still dealing with the inexact science of people.
Yeah.
And the more that you embrace that, and more that you realize that you're one of those inexact humans, the better you're going to be at what you do. And it doesn't mean you're going to be successful overnight. It just means you're going to get better at it. And isn't that the reason why we call things a practice? Isn't that the reason why we come to work every day? Because you want to get better than the day before. And if you want to say the numbers on the board are the only way that you measure it, you're not paying attention to the finer parts.
Yeah.
Just a
The
word.
numbers aren't going to be there immediately, in that moment. But you have to have that awareness, that authenticity, the well-being, all these different pieces, and be in that precise moment to build up to those numbers. So you got to give yourself that chance too.
Right.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Man, Brandon, we have so many great insights here. Thank you so much for coming on today.
I love discussions like this because it's a different level. And I think I also think it's really kind of where we're going. And if you're a business leader, if you have a medium or small size company, you need a partner in this. You do, because your line of thinking only brought you so far. And maybe you see it and you just don't know how. And I would encourage you to talk. There are a lot of energetic innovators that have business experience, that are working on their intuition, that are piecing it together like Matt, that I don't know how you can ever have a vision of whatever the success model is. Maybe it's overcoming the next generation. Maybe you're a third generation company. Maybe you want to go public. Maybe you just want to get really good at this, or maybe you want to get your company to a point of sale. Let's be real here. Like sometimes you want to turn it into the cash cow so you can cash it in and go. There's energetic values in everything that you do. And if you don't pay attention to this stuff, you'll never be successful. And where business brings you to, I have an MBA from Harvard. I went here, I went to Carnegie, whatever. What you're missing is that those finer tools. And I think you need somebody to guide that. And in relative terms,
it's hard to do
bottom line, it's not going
yourself.
to take
You
a
always
whole
need
lot
that
out of
extra
it to
set of
hire
eyes to
somebody
kind of
like
help
that
guide you through that.
in the grand scheme
it's so
of things.
important.
But you need that person in your back pocket. You really need it. I can't say that enough. I appreciate the level of questioning and really this topic.
Thanks, Brandon. Yeah, it's been a great conversation. Definitely want to have you back on again. We can go so much deeper, and we can stay on this call probably for another 3 hours and still, have more to talk about.
We're on 3 hours.
Not yet. We're getting, but I have some outro music for you. So this is new to the show. We have never done this before, but I have some outro music. I thought it was just.
Did you write this or did you stock it? Like, what did you do?
This is a song that you'll know.
Nikola with the Tesla. Little Edison's medicine.
Little Edison medicine to end on.
I was on my guitar last night playing No Way Out.
Were you really?
And Little Susie. Oh yeah, I did.
There you go.
I love it. All right, Matt. Thanks so much for having me on. I can't wait to come back.
Thank you, Brandon.
We have made it to the end of another episode. Thank you for tuning in. A couple of things before you go. If you have found value in this episode, I am sure you'll find value in what we have coming up. So please subscribe so you will have access and know when we launch the next episode. Also, leave a review. The more reviews we have, the further our reach becomes, and I truly want this to be heard by as many leaders as possible. Don't hog this all for yourself. I would love to hear your insights on this topic, so meet me on social media at Matt Mueller Innovation on LinkedIn and Instagram. And lastly, if you want to learn more about my story and what I can do for you and your company, go to themindfulinnovator.com. I would love to help you innovate on purpose. Until next time, just remember, bring a level of awareness to each conversation, each observation, each moment, and you can create great change in this world. Thank you.